Welcome to Concept with Justin. You walk a path of flat stones set into the lawn, the spaces between them filled with tiny river pebbles that crunch pleasantly underfoot. Along the edge, a row of deep green bird's nest ferns and long trough planters creates a low, cool wall that muffles the distant traffic noise. A collection of slender bamboo in tall, narrow pots stands against the fence, providing privacy and a vertical rhythm that leads the eye up toward the sky. Interspersed are sculptural succulents, agave and aeonium, whose bluish tones contrast with the lush green of the shade plants. The pots are placed so that each grouping makes a small scene, an arrangement for breakfast, a shady corner for reading, a sunny spot for herbs. It is easy to see how the garden is meant to be used. It speaks in gestures that are practical and poetic at once. A small fountain bubbles in a corner, simple and low, its basin surrounded by small pebbles and a ring of aromatic plants, rosemary, lemon verbena, and a compact lavender. The sound of water is a constant that stitches the space together, a soft, cooling presence that calms the senses. When you stand nearby and lean over the basin, dragonflies hover and land on the water's lip, their wings catching the light. The water feature is scaled to the garden, nothing oversized, because the idea here is intimacy rather than drama. The placement also helps with temperature. As water evaporates, it cools the immediate air, and the surrounding pots of greenery hold that coolness like a pocket. The fountain becomes a small climate machine and a quiet focal point for the whole yard. Containers make the design flexible. You can change the arrangement seasonally, swap plants in and out, and move things to catch or avoid sun. The pots are chosen not only for their look but for their ability to age gracefully. Terracotta warms in sunlight, glazed ceramics reflect and add color. Corten steel will rust and settle into the palette like an old friend. Some pots are perched on simple wooden stands, lifting plants to eye level and creating tiers of green that read like a living sculpture. Others are grouped on the ground to feel like informal clusters. The variations in height and texture keep your gaze moving and make the garden feel larger than it is. A single bench is tucked beneath an arch of climbing jasmine, its sweet fragrance most noticeable at dusk. Sitting there, you feel surrounded by intentional softness. plant selection is about contrast and harmony. Leaf shapes vary from bold, banana-like leaves that provide big, cooling shade, to fine, feathery ferns that whisper when the wind stirs. Colors are largely in the green family: chartreuse, deep forest, blue-green. But there are accents: the purple sheen of semioniums, the silver gray of artemisia, the coppery tones of select grasses. The result is a cohesive palette that still allows for visual surprises. Fragrant plants are placed near seating areas so scent becomes part of the experience. Jasmine climbing on a trellis by the dining table, mint in a shallow pot beside a morning chair, lavender lining a sunlit step. Even in the most sheltered parts of the yard, the planting feels layered. A canopy of small trees and large palms above, mid-layer shrubs and potted perennials at eye level, and low pots of ground cover that spill pleasantly over edging. This layered approach creates multiple microclimates and textured spaces for different moods. Lighting is understated but thoughtful. A soft, warm glow emanates from low-level path lights tucked among pots and under benches, enough to guide your step but subtle enough to preserve night sight. Solar lanterns hang from pergola beams and tree branches, their light flickering slightly as if lit by candle. Spotlights are carefully aimed to lift particular specimens. An olive tree's silver leaves shimmer, a sculptural cactus casts a dramatic silhouette, and none of the lighting is harsh. At night the garden transforms, reflections shiver on the water, shadows become part of the design, and the aromas feel more concentrated. Even a single strategically placed light can change the mood from daytime leisure to evening reverie, and the pot arrangement appears almost sculptural in the dimness. Functionality is woven through the beauty. A compact outdoor kitchen sits along one side of the yard, its surfaces weatherproof and easy to clean, and potted herbs are within arm's reach for cooking. A narrow, movable cart carries extra trays and utensils when needed and tucks away when the meal is over. Seating is made for comfort: deep chairs with washable cushions, a low lounge area for stretched-out afternoons, stools that double as side tables, and extra seats. Containers of various sizes serve practical purposes. Some are self-watering, reducing maintenance. Others have built-in composting systems or hidden reservoirs that feed water slowly to the roots. These details reduce the barrier to using the space daily and help keep the Oasis feeling casually elegant rather than high maintenance. Sustainable choices show up everywhere. Rainwater collection barrels sit discreetly behind a screen, their stored water routed to drip irrigation systems that feed pots and planters with steady, efficient hydration. Soil mixes are chosen for container culture, rich and fast draining where needed, heavy and moisture retaining in larger pots for trees. Mulches cover exposed soil and help reduce evaporation. Compost bins turn kitchen scraps into rich potting mix for annuals and herbs. Pests are managed with companion planting, beneficial insects, and physical barriers rather than harsh chemicals, preserving the small ecosystem the garden fosters. The overall strategy is to work with natural cycles so the garden thrives without demanding constant intervention. A pergola acts as a spine for the backyard, its beams supporting shade cloths, hanging pots, and open-air lighting. Climbers like tropical mandevilla and fragrant jasmine weave across it, creating a living ceiling that filters the sun. Beneath, a dining table sits ready for meals where light plays through leaves above. In the center of the pergola, a collection of hanging pots of varying heights creates a chandelier of greenery, trailing ivy, spilling lobelia, bright coleus, its motion quiet and gentle on summer evenings. The pergola also frames views. From the table you can see the fountain on one side, a little reading nook on the other, and beyond, the house in a softened edge. The structure makes the garden feel like a sequence of rooms rather than a single large field, and each room has its own character. The idea of an oasis in pots translates well to different scales. On a small urban patio, a tall fiddle-leaf fig in a statement pot can create canopy, while a bank of pots on a railing forms a green wall. On a larger suburban plot, bigger planters with small trees define spaces and make intimate corners within a broader landscape. Rooftops benefit from lighter-weight pots, fibrous-rooted plants, and shallow water features to avoid load issues. Regardless of size, the principle remains: concentrate greenery where people will sit and move, use pots to control soil and microclimate, and create layers for depth. Even in the smallest space, you can make a cool, shaded spot that feels far from the busy city below. Texture stands out in a garden of pots. Smooth glazed pottery sits beside rough, hand-thrown terracotta. Weathered wood planter boxes contrast with the burnished surface of metal containers. Plant textures range from glossy tropical leaves to the velvety softness of lamb's ear. Ornamental grasses add movement with their feathery plumes. These tactile differences invite touch, brushing a hand across a fern, feeling the cool smoothness of a glazed pot, or running fingers along a metal rim warmed by the sun. Even the sound textures matter: the rustle of leaves, the patter of water on stone, the gentle clink of pot rims on gravel when wind shakes them. This polysensory approach makes the garden never just a visual object but a living, touchable environment. Edible plants are integrated without turning the space into a vegetable patch. A citrus tree in a large glazed pot provides glossy leaves and fruit that smell like sunshine. A compact fig in a deep container offers both shade and sweet rewards. Herb pots sit where they can be used, by the grill, near the dining table, and by the kitchen door, so cooking with fresh flavors is effortless. Fruit-bearing plants are chosen for their beauty as much as their produce. Blueberry bushes and terracotta pots show off spring blossoms, summer fruit, and fall color. Edible flowers like nasturtiums trail from pots and add peppery petals to salads. These choices ensure the oasis feels generous, providing both aesthetic pleasure and practical benefits. Wildlife finds the space too. Bees and butterflies are frequent visitors to the lavender and salvias. Small birds flit among the bamboo and dive into seed dispensers cleverly hidden in tall planters. A shallow birdbath sits among low pots, offering a safe bathing spot for feathered guests. Even small beneficial insects find niches. A log tucked behind a planter provides shelter, and a patch of native blooms supports local pollinators. Designing with wildlife in mind means choosing plants that nectar the right species and providing water and shelter in accessible ways. The result is a garden that feels part of a larger ecological web, a small, urban oasis where nature is welcomed and supported. Maintenance is made manageable by smart choices. Pots are grouped so watering can be consolidated. Drip lines and soaker hoses run under the gravel and between planters to reach root zones efficiently. Seasonal swaps are intentional. Summer annuals bloom in bright containers while winter-hardy shrubs take their place in larger pots. A few high-effort specimens, like a delicate orchid or a showy tropical, add drama and become focal points, but they are balanced by many low-care plants that thrive on a weekly check-in. Tools hang in a small weatherproof box under the bench so they're always at hand. Instead of long, tedious chores, caring for the garden becomes a series of pleasant rituals: watering, pruning, deadheading, and tasting that keep you connected to the space. Personal touches make the oasis feel like an extension of home. A weathered kettle becomes a planter for herbs on a side table. A child's hand-painted pot marks a birthday. A small wind instrument made of bamboo tinkles softly near the fountain. These items tell stories and change the garden's character from a styled set to a lived-in place. Friends leave tiny gifts, a stone with a warm shape, a clipped sprig of something uncommon, and you incorporate them into the arrangement. Over time, the pots themselves develop a patina, moss forming in shaded seams, salts whitening on the rims, and these marks of age deepen the sense of place. The garden becomes less about perfection and more about accumulation, each object and plant layering memory upon memory. Designing this kind of backyard starts with observing the site, noting where light falls, where winds come from, and where you want to sit. Sketch a rough plan that places pots in clusters near seating and paths, thinking about traffic flow and sight lines. Start with a few key, larger pots to anchor the space, then fill in with medium and small containers to create layers. Choose pot materials and plant varieties that suit your climate and lifestyle. Low-maintenance choices for busy households, more exotic specimens for those who delight in hands-on care. Think about vertical interest. Trellises, hanging pots, and tall stands bring the eye up and make the space feel larger. Budget enough for good potting mix and slow-release fertilizers so plants thrive in their contained environments. If you're building the Oasis in stages, begin with a focal point. A single statement pop with a tall plant, a fountain, or a shaded bench can change how you use the yard and provide direction for future additions. Gradually add plants, paying attention to balance and scale. Swap pots to test different placements. Move a grouping a few feet one way and notice how it changes the view. Use inexpensive seasonal plants to experiment, and invest in a few permanent elements like a quality bench or a sturdy pergola. Over time, the garden will find its own rhythm. Some plants will thrive and become permanent, others will be replaced. This iterative approach keeps the project enjoyable and responsive. As night falls, the garden takes on a different personality. Low lights cast golden pools across the paving. The fountain's ripple catches and breaks the light into dancing shards. Scent seems deeper, as jasmine and night blooming stock release perfumes that unfurl in the cool air. You might gather with a few friends, plates of food passed around a low table, conversations soft and easy. Or you might sit alone with a cup of tea and watch fireflies give themselves over to silent, blinking choreography among the pots. The garden's cooling effect is tangible. Even on warm nights, the air around the fountain and beneath the pergola feels refreshingly different from the street beyond. The planting and water combined make a microclimate that invites long evenings. In the end, the Oasis is less a static design and more a conversation between you and the space. It asks for care, yes, but it gives back much more: shade on a hot afternoon, fragrance at dusk, a place for small gatherings, and a private retreat. The pots make the garden adaptable and forgiving. The plants create the coolness and texture. The materials and lighting craft the mood. Together they form a backyard that is at once practical and poetic. You step back through the patio doors with the faint scent of lavender following you, feeling the slower rhythm the garden seeded in your day. Outside, the pots sit in patient arrangement, ready for the next moment you choose to come back and be part of their quiet, green life.